Okay, thank you very much, Nina. Good afternoon to all. I guess we are all a bit tired after the lunch, but I'm going to give my best to... we should be sustainable. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a view from Montenegro on a green agenda, Green Deal indicators, SDG agenda. Let's start. So as we all already know, Montenegro is currently implementing two developmental agendas. Those are UN Agenda 2030 that gave us 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the other one is the EU accession agenda. So in terms of 2030 agenda, we have 17 SDGs, 169 targets, and 231 SDG indicators, and Montenegro, as well as other UN member states, signatories, set out to achieve as much of SDG targets as possible by the end of 2030. And the most important document guiding us on that road is the UN Development Assistance Framework in Montenegro that is being applied from 2023 to 2027. And this framework has three strategic priorities, as you can see: inclusive economic development and environmental sustainability, human capital development, reducing vulnerability and social inclusion, and social cohesion, people-centered governance, rule of law, and human rights. You can also see all the 17 SDGs that are listed here that range from economic dimension of sustainable development to social and, in the end, environmental sustainability. And I must say that the most used definition of sustainable development comes from the Brundtland Commission, actually UN World Commission on Environment and Development from 1987, that says that sustainable development is a development that satisfies the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to satisfy the same needs or even more needs that may arise in the future. So Montenegro has revitalized its road to fulfilling SDGs by reviving National Council for Sustainable Development with its working groups. And we have Montenegrin government has to regularly report to the UN and other international organizations in terms of achieving SDGs. On the other part of the slide, you can see the EU agenda. Few years ago, we had in mind the Agenda 2025. That meant that Montenegro should be a full member of the EU by 2025, but now that agenda has slowly transitioned towards 2030. The main document governing these relations is a program of accession of Montenegro to the EU that is regularly adopted every year in February for this year in February 2023. We have negotiation clusters that are part of the newly adopted negotiation framework methodology, actually served to us by the Commission in 2020. And on the other half of the slide, you have IPA 3 windows, so with its thematic priorities. And the most important when we are talking about climate change, climate resilience is the IPA window 3 that focuses on green agenda and sustainable connectivity. We have a newly established SDG Acceleration Fund that can be found at this address, sdgmontenegro.me. There you can find all the important data regarding SDGs. The latest update happened at the end of last year. In terms of UN Development Framework strategic priorities, we have sorted SDGs and EU negotiation chapters by their clusters according to the new methodology. So we have inclusive economic development and environmental sustainability with all SDGs except for SDG 4 that deals with quality education. And we have all the negotiation chapters that are, as I said, sorted by clusters, and many of them are repeating, but they are not the same in each of the strategic priorities. The second one is human capital development, enhancing climate, social inclusion, and reducing vulnerability. And we have there mostly the social dimension of sustainable development, so goals that are concerning poverty, quality education, clean water and sanitation, and of course the one that deals with governance and peace and institutions that deal with the rule of law and human rights. And the third priority is social cohesion, people-centered governance, that is on the overlap of economic and social dimension of sustainable development. And apart from these SDGs mentioned in the middle, we also have the ones dealing with industry, innovation, infrastructure, etc. And of course, we have SDG 17 that actually means partnership for the goals. What do we have all? What do all UN member states have to do together in order to achieve the SDGs by 2030? When we come from the global level to the level of Montenegro, what do we have to do to implement SDGs? Montenegro was among the first UN members to nationalize the UN Agenda 2030. We did that by making the National Strategy for Sustainable Development in 2016, and that strategy included its own action plan that had 6 thematic priorities, 102 measures, and 601 sub-measure. So we should definitely talk and do something about it. We need a comprehensive update of that action plan just to be in line with the newly developed policies and sectoral strategies. We have to make it possible to not only have a national Sustainable Development Council, but we have to have those councils on the local level and local action plans. We have to strengthen the statistical data producers because the current system is actually governed by the Monstat, the Statistical Office of Montenegro, and everyone who produces statistical data has to go a process of validation by Monstat. Then we have to strengthen and streamline indicator data collection reporting, as it was already previously said. We have to pilot a set of composite indicators that are actually part of our National Strategy for Sustainable Development, and they are not still in the statistical system, they are not still being measured. We have to ensure adequate financing for sustainable development, as this is part of the SDG 17 that I already mentioned. Here we can see the nationally determined contributions that all countries that signed and ratified Paris Agreement have to deal with. As regards the situation in the region, every country in the region has had some successes in terms of lowering their GHG emission. So in Albania we have lowered GHG emission from 2016, Montenegro 35% reduction from 1990, which is the global goal. Bosnia 33% since 1990, North Macedonia, it's the largest share, so 51% reduction since 1990, Kosovo 16%, and Serbia 33.3% since 1990. And in terms of Montenegro, which you can see in the lower part of the slide, has produced a report that is submitted to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, was submitted in 2021. And here you can see the comparison of levels emitted from different sectors of Montenegrin economy in 1990 and in 2019. Those are the latest data available for you on the UNFCCC site. As presented in our third national report that was submitted in 2020 to the UNFCCC, Montenegro is definitely exposed to climate change hazards, and this is the vulnerability analysis by sector. So the water sector is reflected by the water balance in all river basins in Montenegro, which by the end of the 21st century will see a reduction in average annual flow by 27%. The forestry sector is definitely affected by climate change, especially with these forest fires that we see almost every year, not only in Montenegro, but all around the world and even in the region. Agricultural sector is especially vulnerable to climate change because it is dependent on specific temperature conditions and of course on rainfall. Fishing sector is highly affected by the rise of the water temperature, and of course public health, health of all of us, is highly dependent on safe drinking water and sufficient food for all of us, secure shelter, and good social conditions. And climate change, definitely, as we see almost every week, and we mentioned the case of Italy a few days ago, is definitely highly affected by climate change. Here we have IPA 3 annual plans for Montenegro, actually two actions. The first one is EU acquis related activities for environment and climate change policies. That is, of course, funded by the EU mostly. And its main SDG connection is SDG 11, that deals with, that says make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And other SDGs related to this action are goal 12, that is actually trying to lead us to a circular economy. Goal 14, SDG 14, that leads us to a blue economy, to sustainable water ecosystems, and goal 15, land ecosystems, so more sustainable land ecosystems. And action 3, EU for support for sustainable connectivity and green economy in Montenegro, that mostly connects with SDG 9, build resilient infrastructure, foster innovation, and so on. And other would be SDG 14, so blue economy, water ecosystems. In terms of already mentioned IPA energy package that was served to Western Balkan countries after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, all of Western Balkan countries will get 500 million euros assistance from the EU, and actually 90% of this package was already disbursed to these countries at the beginning of this year, and the second tranche will be disbursed upon successful implementation of national action plans by all the countries. And this energy package was given to Western Balkan countries to mitigate the impact of high energy prices, which were provoked by the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, to keep energy prices affordable, especially for highly vulnerable households, and support policy measures that should accelerate the transition towards producing energy from renewable energy sources. How can we localize the implementation of SDGs if we see the level of Podgorica as a local government? And how should we include SDG indicators in IPA 3? We should update the action plan for Chapter 22 that deals with the disbursement of cohesion policy funds in the future once we are a full member of the EU, to invest in administrative capacities at all levels, not only local but national, to make different staff retention strategies, because we have a brain drain from institutions that deal with the European accession process, we all know that. We should invest in resources, particularly in the capital project administration, that deals with developmental projects. Then we should strengthen statistical directorate administrative capacities and administrative capacities in the Office for Sustainable Development that now operates within the government of Montenegro. And we should consider maybe giving the EU accession funds to particularly this office in order to support the SDG acceleration fund that was recently established. And how to include SDG indicators in IPA 3 in terms of green agenda for the Western Balkans. Well, programming is still not set in place, and maturity of actions is of utmost importance in this whole process, because there were some projects that had not enough ready documentation, so that's why we didn't have something under energy package that was suitable for financing from the EU side. Then we should support establishment of the new management structures of IPA 3 in all Western Balkan countries' administrations. And we should definitely be more focused on the cluster 4 that deals with sustainable connectivity. And how do we link green agenda for the Western Balkans and European Green Deal indicators? Well, Green Agenda Western Balkans indicators, 34 of them, are complementary to the SDG indicators that we have in the Agenda 2030. the EU SDGs, and specifically European Green Deal indicators, counting 26 of them. Green Agenda for the Western Balkans indicators are actually really focused on Cluster 4, so Green Agenda and Sustainable Connectivity, and IPA 3, Window 3, Green Agenda and Sustainable Connectivity. And we have a recently adopted IPA 3 result framework with focus on indicators for this Window 3. These are the results of a study done by Professor Đurović and supported by GIZ. Thank you very much.